Hello and welcome to the Elmo Scenario Moment. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Brad Hathcock. Hopefully, we can get this fucking show on the road. We're having some technical difficulties today, but we're gonna move past it.
Yeah, we're
We're professionals.
professional podcasters, just like everybody else. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to talk about complicated subjects, and then we are going to hopefully get through this for the third time. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to talk about, well, I was just going to throw out topics rattling around in my head, and then we could go on from there. The first one was that we have a former president of the United States now charged with a felony, which would be the first time ever, and under the guise of some prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, who ran on prosecuting him, saying I was going to get a conviction, and then picking out a bunch of things that nobody's ever been charged for before, and using a federal law or charging as the state against a federal law to get him on like 34 counts of bad paperwork, basically. And he's a bad guy. I don't like him. So when I'm defending him, it's probably serious or there's something wrong. Doesn't smell, uh, doesn't pass the smell test, as they say. Um, but yeah, a porn star because he's a piece of shit and she's a piece of shit. She tried to blackmail him, and that's what they're trying to do. That's what they got him on. So that happened at the same time today. The Hunter Biden, um, what is it like? Okay,
Felony
so
gun prosecution.
yeah, so he's a crackhead who lied on a gun form about not taking drugs. Gets
Aren't
a
we all?
gun, yeah, gets a gun, and then his the ex wife of his brother who died and him were sleeping together, and they had a fight, and she threw it into a trash receptacle by a high school, and
How did
now
his brother die again? Was it in Iraq? Was it from
no
cancer? Was he
no there
shot by a
was
cop?
it
I can't remember.
in like 1946, a giant sea monster rose out of the ocean in Japan, and I
Oh,
think he got caught up in that.
was it Godzilla? Was it Cthulhu? Which
It
one?
could. The history books are not very specific, but Joe Biden's brother was killed by cannibals at the same time.
Oh,
So
but that
there's
caused
that.
like the chain reaction, right, for Godzilla to
Yeah,
come out
and
and
whatever could have been Godzilla. We don't really know.
so really, we never actually dropped a nuclear bomb, considering nuclear bombs haven't been used since, and it was really Godzilla that destroyed them. Like,
Well, to be fair, Godzilla, uh, those bombs were dropped, and Godzilla appeared before. Maybe I don't know. So on top of all that, he's also a tax cheat, and he's got a daughter he doesn't acknowledge, and his current wife called some old Trump advisor from the White House a Nazi. So everything there is going really well. Also, Joe Biden, when Kenya came out to visit, Joe Biden at the state dinner invited Merrick Garland, who's prosecuting him, and him to the same dinner because this is all completely normal. It's normal for a former president to be charged with obscure crimes and the current president to put the thumb on the scale of his dirtbag son's trial. Um, so we got jury selection there. We have the stage set for two very big playoffs. The Dallas Mavericks are playing the Boston Celtics for the NBA Finals, and the Edmonton Oilers are playing my Florida Panthers in the NHL Finals. So those are really important. Abroad, we have three stories I'm tracking. One is that the election in Mexico was the first woman ever elected. She's a socialist, I hear. She's going to fix everything. We've got Ukraine and Russia. They're virtually a stalemate, but Ukraine has apparently been given the green light to now attack in Russia. It's a big deal because they weren't allowed to for the last 2 years. They would have been winning this war if we would have given them everything up front. It's just we put too many obstacles in place for them. And then speaking of obstacles, the Israelis have taken the Philadelphia corridor, which is the uh, sort of line between Egypt and Gaza, and shocking. I know, they're finding dead hostages and tunnels going into Egypt. So Egypt is not happy because they're going to get found out that they were actually giving the Palestinians weapons and resources to build these tunnels. And they're also doing some fighting in Jabalia, I think it is. But for the most part now, it's just a real, since Ramadan, basically they pulled back, and now they're just going like, it's door to door fighting. They've limited civilian casualties significantly, and the stupid pier that I've been pissed off about for 2 months is washed away and gone. So that's the stage I've set for you. Pick one and go.
Where do you want to start, buddy?
Well, let's keep the happy stuff for the end. So talk to me about Israel. What is your? That's the one I'm the most interested in. So tell me what you think about what's going on there.
Sure. Obviously, we're actually seeing a lot of protesting and stuff from Israelis against Netanyahu. The International Criminal Court has actually, shockingly, put out arrest warrants for Netanyahu, who has now been invited to speak in front of Congress. I believe he will show up. The U.S. does not have to abide by the ICC's mandate for arrest. Apparently, other countries have stated that they would actually abide by that. And we're actually starting to see other countries recognize Palestine as a state itself, which is kind of an interesting turn here because the U.S. constantly has said they believe in a two-state solution, but when that resolution comes up in front of the UN, they shut it down. So what they say and what they do are two obviously totally opposite things. Israel's in trouble. They're fairly isolated on the world stage. A lot of people want all of this to come to an end, but they've recently stated that the war could last another 7 or 8 months. There's speculation that they want to push this war longer because they want Donald Trump in office, and we can kind of almost use that as a nice roundabout way to get to Donald Trump, I guess. But Netanyahu supposedly wants Donald Trump in office because he's going to be like more along the lines of give them whatever they want whenever they want it and let them finish the job. I mean, he's been pretty vocal about that, where he says you gotta go in, you gotta finish the job. But he's also been saying like don't do it this way or that way. It's so weird. Like, 'cause you know how I feel kind of about the situation. I kind of don't care as long as the U.S. stops funding it. I don't really care. One way or the other. It's fine. You're allowed to defend yourself against a terrorist organization. No problem with that. I just don't like taxpayer dollars going towards funding pretty much anything that doesn't involve the U.S. So, that's my stance on it. But I don't know, man. Well, it's kind of tough to tell. Like, Netanyahu's constantly pissed off. He is facing a lot of issues at home. And there's just mounting pressure from all sides to get it done. A ceasefire deal has been presented that the U.S. is urging Israel to take and urging Hamas to take. But apparently there's some big issues there with how it's supposed to work. Apparently the ceasefire deal is supposed to permanently give a ceasefire while they work out the second phase of the deal and everything else. And it doesn't seem like Israel is amenable to that. They said that this deal came from Hamas. There's news reports kind of coming out now stating that Netanyahu is telling his people to put out a negative connotation about the deal so that he can get support to not take the deal, and basically blame Hamas for such a poor deal and stuff like that. And as we all know, Netanyahu wants this war to continue, whether it be to get Donald Trump in office because Biden voters really, really hate the way that he's handling things.
Well, yeah, and it's worth mentioning that Netanyahu is not he's not popular in his country, and Gallant has come out and said basically that they're willing to overturn the current government and started a new one. So,
well, I mean, there was an IDF, like an IDF fighter or something that came out that said that he would overthrow the government
yeah,
if they don't develop. He's not saying to stop attacking Hamas, but if they
he's
don't
saying
develop
finish the
like,
job.
yeah, he's like, if we don't have like well, they also want a plan in place for diplomacy after the job is done, right? And they don't want Hamas, but Israel also doesn't want the Palestinian Authority in power at all.
There's almost no difference.
Right. I don't think there's any winning here, which is why Israel doesn't want to put out a plan. There's no winning. They constantly just say we aren't going to be the ones running it, but they have no alternative plan either. So I think the
Nobody
whole
does,
thing.
man.
No, I don't think anybody does. But and let's not make any mistakes here. Okay, this shit has been going on for all time. Like this has been a problem forever.
Yeah,
It's
this
not
is
going
a
to just go away
24-year-old
now.
problem.
Not even that. I mean, this goes like way beyond.
Well, if you want to go all the way
that.
back,
Like,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, this goes back to like biblical times where this shit happens. Okay, so nothing's going to change because of Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I mean, let's just
They will both be dead before we find out the resolution to this current crisis.
probably, if there even is one.
Well, I want to mention that I don't think Netanyahu is going to make it through to the next U.S. presidential administration. So that's probably he has a huge problem on his hands because he is not talking to the Israeli people. He's talking to American media. That's a big problem because it's not us he needs to worry about. They should, if they don't finish this, he's gone. That's my point of view.
I think he's trying to basically just keep the war going until people kind of forget about it. We're coming up on a couple months away from a year of.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but the Israelis aren't going to forget about it. I didn't even talk over you.
But that's one of the reasons why they want Netanyahu gone, because he was the perpetrator basically of this and allowing it to happen. So they've been calling for elections. Clearly, he suspended elections, just like Zelensky in Ukraine suspended elections. We're supposed to be defending democracy, but we're allowing suspended elections. I believe we were at war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we still had elections. And that was 20 years.
I have to correct you on one thing. Netanyahu could go at any moment if the government dissolves. That's how
could. And some of his cabinet members have said they are going to leave.
Yes, they did.
They will leave if they don't come up with a plan. And he's facing a lot of troubles domestically. It's not just the war and everything else. It is his government, his people. Everybody wants him gone. And we'll have to see what happens, because they're supposed to have elections. I thought they were supposed to have them already, or they were close to a new election cycle, I believe. So,
well, I listened to him on a couple of podcasts, which is this is the problem. He's not talking to the Israeli people. He's talking to me. So like I get to listen to what he thinks. He's a very intelligent man. He's a very wise man. He's smart, and but he's a little too smart for his own britches, I'll say. And yeah, it's going to cost him. Zelensky's a little different. I think the way the war is going there, I don't know if elections would be the best way to go, because he's got a problem with, he's got a generational problem. Young people do not want to fight that war. I don't know why. I don't know how you can make a generation fight a war they don't want to fight, but
what, in Ukraine?
Yeah, because
dude, I've seen so many
people.
videos. Yeah, like they're trying to conscript all of these like teenagers or young men, and they're fighting back, and they're putting them on buses and like forcing them to training or to the front lines. I mean, is that democracy to you? I mean, I believe that the draft was anti-democratic, in my opinion, to fight in Vietnam. That's just my opinion.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of people hold that opinion, especially in hindsight of Vietnam, and that it was like a false flag war. Um, you know, I don't know. I'm not saying that Russia attacking Ukraine is a false flag in any way, but I just don't think people want this to continue. I'm not saying they want to roll over and die, but or no pun intended, really. But I don't think that they just want to roll over, but they also don't want to fight to the death. I mean, they're Russian adjacent, okay? Like, it's not like they were never part of Russia or anything like that. And I'm not saying Russia should win here. My stance on Ukraine is the same as it is with Israel and not funding it. But, you know, I, I, I don't know. I believe they should fight, but it's not up for me to say that. Like, would you fight for your country if we were invaded by, say, Russia or China or whatever? Would you
Yeah.
take up arms and fight for your country if it came down to it? I would.
Well,
I believe. I like to believe at least that I would.
yeah.
In those circumstances, because we're not talking about joining the military, right? Like, we're talking about
Forced
right,
conscription.
forced conscription, and we're talking about like a foreign invasion into our land. Um, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. I mean, as a hypothetical,
Right. Well, because you
because
can never actually know until it happens to you, right? Like, I don't know. I think these young guys, they know, like, they just see it as a potential losing battle. It is all over the media that this Ukraine war is not about defeating Russia necessarily. It's about depleting them, you know, and that way if something happens we can take care of them a little bit easier. And it's just they want to try to defeat Russia in some capacity without using NATO troops. That's what the whole thing is about ultimately. That's why we keep funding it, and all this other shit is like they are trying to stop Putin. But
well, we never funded it for Ukraine to win. That's the problem. I don't know why we as American policy, not you and I, the people we elect, have taken this stance now that we don't want victory anywhere. And we don't. I mean, we tell Ukraine, go this far and no farther. We tell Israel, go this far and no farther. We tell Taiwan, here are your weapons, but it goes back to Iraq. We had the Gulf War and we could have taken out Saddam Hussein, and we didn't.
well, that's
We
because we put him in power. I mean,
that's a
come
whole
on,
other story.
come
But
on.
we
It took a lie for us to get into
yeah,
Iraq. I mean, now my
we don't.
question to you though is,
Yeah,
all right, and I sorry to cut you off,
no, it's
but
good.
you made a point that was, um, we basically gave Ukraine just enough to not win. What makes you think that if we just arm them slightly better, that they would win?
Well, this goes back to the very beginning. We started our podcast shortly before this invasion happened, if I recall correctly. And at the time, the Ukrainians were not only winning, everybody thought they were going to get rolled, and they did not get rolled. Russia fucked up. And at that time, if we would have given them everything they needed, including the ATACMs, including the tanks, including all the fun stuff, I don't think Russia could have prosecuted the war. But what happened was that they didn't have enough and the lines froze in place. And now it's just counteroffensive and counteroffensive.
But Russia
So
had only put like 10% of their total military might into that first
they
incursion.
fucked up too.
Yeah,
That's the
of course they
problem.
fucked up. I mean, they probably could have steamrolled through and they'd be a lot further than they are today, I believe, had they not been like, well, we can just throw 10% here. And,
Yeah,
like,
they would have been.
I firmly believe they'd probably be further entrenched into Ukraine at this point had they actually nutted up. I think they really thought that Ukraine was going to roll over. I'm glad they did not. I don't want to see a sovereign country get invaded, but they should defend themselves. Um, but I
But
I don't
what
think
I say,
there's a win here for Ukraine.
well, not anymore. So at the time, I remember telling you this, that we weren't doing enough. If we were gonna, the problem is that we didn't do enough. If we're gonna commit this much and no more, then we just go and we have Congress argue every year about blah blah blah, and Biden saying, "Oh, we can't do that," and I don't know, that's how we get here. I just think that it doesn't matter now. We talked about it at the time. That's why you were saying don't send taxpayer money to Ukraine, and I was saying send more taxpayer money to Ukraine, and then we neither of us got what we wanted. So it
No,
just
well,
this is how we
I
get
mean
here.
they're still sending money, so you're kind of getting what you want, but
Well,
you
the
know,
ATACMS make a big difference, and we didn't do anything for a
sure.
long time. And the F-16s make a big difference.
And
That's
now we've given them the go ahead to start using U.S. munitions, um, to
on
attack,
Russia.
to attack
It's
Russia, which
bad. It's bad foreign policy, Brad, because we basically told them not to do anything for 2 years. We froze the conflict,
they
and now
were
we're telling.
though. They were sending drone attacks and shit like that.
I have no
These
problem with it.
again, I don't have a problem with it. If you're attacking my country, I'm going to go ahead and attack yours right back. I'm not saying I have a problem with that. But apparently some of the people in the world do, because Ukraine blew up some like early detection system for ICBMs, and that doesn't mean I see people pooping. That's
Yeah,
intercontinental ballistic missiles, and people are kind of freaking out about that because that's kind of like a nuclear detection system, and you could get them jumpy, like, well, our detection system is blown up, like, did somebody launch a nuke? And then who knows, they might just launch one back. So people are kind of freaking out about that. I don't think there's a good solution here, but I don't think that we're fighting, or that we're paying for Ukraine to fight, um, to win. I truly don't believe that. I mean, they were conscripting people with Down syndrome and shit into their military.
yeah.
So
I agree with you in a way that we are like completely opposite on what that means at the beginning. But I do believe you, and I agree that we are not funding them to win a war now. Um, and that's pretty. That's like a Biden. It's amazing, actually, to me how our media has covered for him in so many of these instances, because you wouldn't hear it from anyone here that this is happening. It goes for Afghanistan as well, like many different fronts. Our media doesn't cover, uh let's say, they don't even ask questions of Biden. And Biden doesn't answer questions because he is 3,000 years old. And so, yeah, nobody goes to Biden today and says, "Why aren't you X, Y, or Z with Ukraine or Israel or whatever?" It just says so much about it. Like, I think when people write this story in 30 years, they look back or whatever, they'll say that Biden foreign policy was a not only a unique failure, but one that is going to affect the rest of the
it is a
world for a
unique
long time.
failure, and
Yeah.
it's going to have a huge impact on this election. I think foreign politics really is never one of the like top
No,
selectors
no.
or anything like that, and I still think that, well, the war in Ukraine at least is not high on the list this year, but I think people's stance on Israel is relatively high. And what's interesting is Trump has like a generally more pro-Israel view, um, as far as giving them weapons and things like that. He's not viscerally attached to them, the way that Biden is from like an emotional standpoint. Uh, but he also wants to like stop funding Ukraine. So like it's this weird space, right, where it's like he wants to end one of the, one piece of funding just to fully fund something else. Like, I don't know.
I don't take him very seriously on any of this because
No, of
if he
course
gets in,
not.
if he gets in office, but we ought to now take this opportunity to mention the fact that Biden is absolutely fucked in the polls. He has the lowest approval rating of any president since like going back to Eisenhower. Not that Eisenhower had, that's just when they started the polling.
Every Democrat down ballot has been outperforming Biden like crazy.
Yep.
Okay. That's generally not good news. You want the top of your ticket to be, polling the best, but he's polling historically bad.
Yeah.
Historically bad.
Well,
And
he is
it's getting
historically
worse.
bad,
Right.
but
I mean,
that's what's crazy about the media. Like, it drives me crazy because they're like they live in the bubble of bubbles because they think they're writing articles that are like, why don't the American people appreciate how good the economy is? They write these things, right? And it's
yeah.
like,
Oh
are
yeah,
you
dude,
out of your mind?
they're gaslighting America.
Yeah.
And the administration has said that the polls are skewed and they want to unskew the polls, but they only say that when it comes to Biden. They don't say that with the rest of the Democrats. They're like, look at these polls, we're polling so well. Like, get the fuck out of here. Okay. People hate your stance on Ukraine. They hate the fact that you're old and like decrepit. I mean, I'm sorry, the guy just doesn't have it. Now, don't get me wrong, in the debate at the end of the month, they're gonna both be jacked up on all the cocaine and fucking
Yeah.
Pedialyte that anyone can find to inject into
Yeah.
one human being, and they're gonna put on a show. And hopefully, we're gonna try still to watch it live, I think, and do a podcast during it. But
No matter what, I'm gonna watch that debate,
oh,
but
100%.
only because I don't mind watching a car crash.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves watching a car crash. It has to happen that way. I mean, no matter what, we're fucked. It's something like 51%, I think, of voters. Now, again, this is a poll, so take that for what it is. But like 51% of voters are essentially saying that Trump should drop out now that he's been convicted of a felony, right? But are these charges really a felony? I don't know. Like, he has sentencing in July 11th, I think.
Yeah,
But
it's got to be appealed.
right, but
It's not going to
it
stick.
is going to be appealed. Okay,
Yeah.
these charges are, like you had mentioned, they're state charges that they tried to basically like just jack up to be these like federal charges. They're going after him because he paid Stormy Daniels off, which isn't illegal. Okay, you're actually allowed to pay hush money to whomever you want.
Sure.
And they're trying to like get him on this campaign finance shit. It it doesn't matter. They all do this kind of shit. They're just trying to get him for it now. And where I find it very interesting is, this kind of comes back to the podcast where I talked about the end of the empire, right? Dave Smith just said that we're seeing the end of our empire when he debated Chris Cuomo for like 3 hours. I listened to that whole thing. It was interesting. They talked mostly about COVID, and it just got to be a little bit repetitive. But Dave Smith mentioned the end of the empire there, and we're seeing this like kangaroo court shit go on. It sets a precedent now to go after presidents for past crimes and things like that, and they fucking should. That this actually sets a good precedent, in my opinion, to go after presidents for crimes. But Democrats, as you know and have said, they don't realize that a Republican's going to get into office and do the same fucking thing. The same fucking thing. So you better have your fucking house in order, because if you don't, you're going to go to jail. And I fucking hope so. But it also will set this like dangerous precedent for the United States as a whole.
Well,
Because what if Trump wins? Okay, he's going to appeal. It's going to have to go to the Supreme Court because the law that they tried to get him under has never
Sure.
been tried by the Supreme Court. So it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court. We all know how that's going to work out. Or
I'll talk about that in a minute.
Trump is going to get into office, and at his inauguration, he's going to fucking pardon himself. Bet it.
I don't see why that's even a problem, but I
Because it
don't.
should be a fucking problem. Presidents should have no immunity whatsoever. None. If you commit a fucking crime that, every president likes to say, not above the law. That is bullshit. Because they have presidential immunity from virtually everything. It's bullshit.
Well, if
Or
you're
they get pardoned.
in office, you have that power. I don't see why you can't pardon yourself.
Oh no, he definitely will. But then is it going to create this like Democrat January 6th situation where they now are so pissed off that he just like pardoned himself from crimes?
They're laying the groundwork for that now.
100% they are.
You know, democracy is going to end, they say, if Trump gets reelected. But they're not really acting accordingly because they have decided that they're going to hitch their wagon to the most unpopular president who's 81 years old, whose son is just going to court today. And that's the party who thinks democracy is in peril. They're going to lose. I'm almost certain now that they are going to lose this election. He cannot win without Arizona, Nevada, maybe Pennsylvania, maybe Virginia, of all places, is has them even.
But
He
here's the
can't
thing,
win.
dude. They have been telling everybody for 50 some years, okay? Like recently I've been watching this whole Bill Clinton Monica Lewinsky docuseries on fucking Amazon. It's
That's when
great.
all this started, by the way.
It's great. Yeah, it's amazing. But that is you can actually see it. That is when a lot of this like really partisan like shit started.
Yeah.
And they've been telling people for so long, democracy is at stake. Democracy is at stake. Every fucking election cycle, it's the same thing. Democracy is at stake. And here we are. We're still here. The difference is now we're getting into the year 250 when all empires fall. So maybe it really is at stake.
Well, I appreciate you giving me credit for mentioning that the Democrats set precedents, and then it always comes back to haunt them. And that starts with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, because
Oh,
Bill
100%.
Clinton, he does something really bad, and then they excuse it. And that's where a lot of MoveOn.org, that's what MoveOn.org came from, is they were moving on from the Bill Clinton thing. There's a lot, all this shit that we know about now, we were like little kids when this stuff happened. And
Yep.
that's where it all started. Now, what got really serious was when Harry Reid waived the filibuster for the Supreme Court, right? That's where shit got real, because that led to 3 conservative justices on the court. And now Democrats have taken a tactic. And this is what I said about laying the groundwork. Justice Alito, his wife, flew the American flag upside down. I'm sure you read this somewhere.
Oh,
And he has the Appeal to Heaven flag, I think it's called. A flag I have never heard of before. It's a pine tree flag that says an appeal to heaven on it. It was a maritime flag in like the late 1700s. I think it was commissioned by George Washington and somebody who worked for him. And this flag had flown outside of the San Francisco government, whatever, city hall for like 40 years. And this is a problem now. This flag became a thing. They took the flag in San Francisco down because it's the most controversial flag we've ever, apparently, it's a stand-in for January 6th, they say. But we only heard about it like 3 weeks ago.
of
So
course.
they're trying to delegitimize the court by any means necessary. It is working, because this stupid flag now means Alito can't adjudicate any Trump court case. He can't do the January 6th one. He can't do the hush money one. Justice Thomas, his wife, kind of is an idiot, and so he's now tainted apparently. But like, he knew a guy who has old history relics in Texas somewhere, right? And we have Kavanaugh and Now we have Barrett, and the Barrett one is funny because her husband is the lawyer for Fox News apparently in some case. The guy's a lawyer. Oh my gosh! But it's very effective, right? And so what you're saying now is Democrats do something and then it happens to them. So I'm sitting here waiting for the moment when I don't know who, maybe it's like the Washington Free Beacon or some journalistic outfit on the conservative side finally looks into some of this shit. Go look at Justice Sotomayor, or go look at Kagan, or go look at Barrett Jackson. Like
Well, they look at Justice Sotomayor and they say, she said some of these cases really made me cry.
that is a shocking admission, by the
Oh
way.
my God.
That
God
is a
forbid.
Yeah, that is a very shocking admission for a justice to make. They are just so pissed that they lost that court, and this is how they are going to delegitimize it. Every institution now is like at risk of this.
Right? But we've already seen that you can't trust the institutions that we have. Okay.
I used
And
to
yeah,
trust them.
dude, trust in the institutions is so fucking low. And I don't think it's really going anywhere. Like it's problematic, and they're gonna continue to do it. They keep saying that we had like the freest and fairest election and like all this other shit in 2020, yet people are still being prosecuted for types of election fraud. So you're gonna sit here and say we had the freest and fairest elections, the election wasn't stolen, all this other stuff. Fine, but they're actively still prosecuting people for election fraud and other things from 2020. So that's not true at all.
Well, look at precedent, right? Al Gore, first presidential candidate who said like I totally won that election and it was stolen from me. People, that's the playbook of Donald Trump. It's from Al Gore.
Yeah. Well, remember Hillary Clinton, there was every reason why. She said like 49 times in an interview that she didn't win the election because she's a woman. Like, come on. Look, you're just a bad fucking candidate. Everybody looks back now in hindsight and was like, wow, she really was super bad. But people wanted to forget all about the bad shit. All
That's
about the
what
bad shit. They did
that's
the
the
same thing with
yeah.
Biden. They sit here and call Trump a fucking racist when Biden is on camera from fucking C-SPAN saying the N-word.
He
Like,
went
get the
to like,
fuck out of here.
he went to Robert Byrd or whoever that was, that senator who was like part
Yeah,
of the Klansmen. He went to he eulogized him, dude.
right. And
He's
not to
behind the
mention,
1994 crime bill.
yeah, exactly. Not like, dude, I brought that shit up before the election, and I know a lot of people were like, Trump is racist, Trump is racist. I'm like, so you're trading racist for racist light, and not even like at least you have video proof that Biden is racist. It's on camera. He said it on fucking C-SPAN.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think Trump is racist too. I
Sure.
also think he is, but also he doesn't really seem to give a shit about race at all. He had that rally in New York, and he invited a couple of drill rappers to it. Like he
He
doesn't give a
and he
shit.
also didn't spend 50 years in government writing fucking laws that disproportionately hurt black people. So, I mean,
The very laws that his son is being
right,
charged
that
under.
he's being charged under now, which is great. So, I want to bring
Yeah,
up one thing for you
sure,
to kind of bring this whole politics thing to a head, since, that's what we were talking about, and we can kind of close out on this.
sure.
So, Semaphore actually did a poll, and the article is entitled "A Dying Empire Led by Bad People." Poll finds young voters despairing over U.S. politics. So this is just kind of like a quick rundown. It says young voters overwhelmingly believe that almost all politicians are corrupt and that the country will end up worse off than when they were born. And this is actually from a Democrat firm that did this poll called Blueprint. So it says the sour mood points towards potential trouble for Joe Biden, who is struggling with Gen Z and younger millennials in polls compared with 2020, and needs to convince them he can be relied upon. As part of the online poll, 943 18 to 30-year-old registered voters, Blueprint asked participants to respond to a series of questions about the American political system. 49% agreed to some extent that elections in the country don't represent people like themselves. 51% agreed to some extent that the political system in the U.S. doesn't work for people like me. 64% backed the statement that America is in decline. And 65% agreed either strongly or somewhat strongly that nearly all politicians are corrupt and make money from their political power. Only 7% of people disagreed.
Okay. So I'll take all of that into consideration. The one thing I'll say is that yes, politicians will always act in their own best interests. That granted.
Without a doubt. Oh, yeah.
That poll, those things you asked, that could have come from any generation going back to the founding of this country. I think that young people always look negatively upon the country that they live in, and I don't put much weight stake on it, much weight on it.
I'm gonna have to go ahead and say I don't think that's true.
You didn't hate the country when you were younger? Because I certainly didn't like George W. Bush. I hated his fucking guts.
I actually got in trouble in school for writing a paper saying that basically we'd be better off governing ourselves, and my teacher called me an anarchist. He was a very pro-Bush teacher.
Well, there you go. I mean, we both come from completely different backgrounds, and we both didn't like George W. Bush. I don't think that's like...
Dude, I followed that Bush election like hardcore. I actually had to, because I was homeschooled for 7th grade, which is when that election took place, and it was part of my like history. And I actually stayed up and watched the whole thing until they said we're gonna have to have a recount. I don't know. So let's see.
Well, I didn't like Al Gore at the time either, but you know, it was formative for me. But what I'm trying to say is that poll doesn't actually sound that shocking to me. It just seems normal.
So from Eisenhower to Biden, so from say 1960 to roughly 2020, or now 2024, I guess.
Yeah.
Public trust in government is near historic lows. This is a percentage of people who say they trust the government to do what is right, just about always or most of the time. From Eisenhower, it was a little over 75%. So we're talking probably 76%.
Yeah, that makes
sense.
That
they trust the government to do what is right. That is now, as of this date is probably from 2023. It's less than 20%. So people have not always hated the country that they live in. That has actually eroded over time. And believe it or not, in this chart, it goes up for George Bush.
Well, that's
shockingly enough, it goes up for George Bush.
Which George Bush? The younger?
George W.
Yeah, okay.
I'm shocked by that, actually. That's actually up around close to 60%.
That's the 9/11 bump, though.
Yeah, it's got to be that 1 year. It does. Yeah, it's like right at 2001, and then trust me, it plummets from close to 60% to like 21%. Obama never gets past like 21%.
I will attribute some of that to social media and the 24-hour news cycle, because before that, Americans were very invested in local and state government and not national politics, and now I think that's all they care about. That's why you get the democracy ends if so-and-so becomes president. Democracy doesn't end in my little town or your little town, right? But
I'll do you one better.
Sure.
I don't think it's that people pay less attention to local politics. I think everybody's just kind of skirted all of that and believe that the national government has more control over their life than local politics. And I think states have kicked a lot of shit up to the federal government.
In blue states, I would absolutely agree with that. I only can say that because I live in the bluest of blue states, and we basically drive policy for the rest of the country in some respect. Okay, we wanted to close on that. We came to a head. That was interesting. I like that. We have a little time left here. Do you want to switch gears and talk about something more positive? Did you want to talk about Godzilla -1? Did you want to talk about hockey? I know you don't care about basketball, but I'm enjoying the whole Luka thing because he's just this big dumb guy who is now in the NBA Finals, and I think that's kind of cool. He's funny. He plays. He's in the top 500 Overwatch 2 players in the world, by the way.
So you said it's the Dallas Mavericks and who in the NBA
And the Boston
Finals?
Celtics.
And the Boston Celtics. At least it's not like fucking LeBron or Steph Curry again.
A lot of people agree with that. You know, a lot of people are done with LeBron, me included. But I'm glad we're. This sounds crazy. I completely tuned out the entire NBA. I loved basketball growing up. I stopped watching it around LeBron coming in, and I'm excited for him to finally like exit the stage because his dipshit son is in the NBA draft and nobody wants him. He's actually like not a good player, and I'm ready for this era of basketball to end so that we can move on to something more
but
exciting.
someone's gonna draft him, and it's
Probably.
dude. It might be LeBron's team, and then
Probably.
they want them to play a season together. I guarantee it.
I guarantee it. And
because
after
it'll
that,
sell tickets. It'll sell tickets.
Well, and we're in a really cool sports moment in general because Caitlin Clark has somehow made the WNBA matter to people, which is kind of interesting.
Except everybody in the WNBA hates her.
Yeah,
because she signed like a huge deal and like all this other stuff, and they all want all this attention on the WNBA, and now they hate her.
It just says so much about something.
I know, it kind of comes full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah. But like Angel Reese is getting deals too, and there's that really attractive woman on the Sparks, LA Sparks. She's kind of a big deal too. I just like I like sports. I like to follow them even if I'm not like fully invested. And even I was like, I wouldn't mind going to watch Caitlin Clark play a basketball game. That'd be kind of cool. I might go down to LA and watch that.
They probably have free tickets to give away for you.
There was a guy on Instagram who goes to WNBA games and he just does weird stuff to see what he can get away with, and like the security's really lax. Like he just ran down to the bench and started shouting.
It's basically going to watch indoor lacrosse, like professional indoor lacrosse. Nobody actually gives a fuck.
Until now, because Caitlin Clark is actually if she wasn't good, it wouldn't matter. She's really good. Like I've been watching her play. Like I know she's really good because she's taking 3-pointers from like half court and making them during the games. Like it's pretty wild. Anyway, we won't talk about the WNBA anymore. But do you have any thoughts on the hockey?
I'm really disappointed they have a whole fucking week off.
Yeah.
Up until Saturday? So it's Tuesday now, and they're off until Saturday. I think that bodes very well for Florida. Because they play a really like rugged, rough style of game, and that's going to bode very well for them to be rested. The only problem is you don't want to like lose out on your momentum, so that part sucks. But
Paul
Bobrovsky
Maurice
will be rested, which is nice.
Yeah, Paul Maurice has those guys pretty. They're in a routine.
I think they're also they might be giving more time off between games because of the travel. As you brought up, it's like the longest travel distance for any Stanley Cup final ever, right? Between Edmonton and Sunrise, Florida.
Yeah, it's a long flight.
It's like 2,500 miles or some shit.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're right about the timing of everything. It's very strange. So I purchased tickets to the Pasadena SoCal Gaming Expo, which happens this Saturday and Sunday, and my ticket was for Saturday, but I didn't know when the finals were gonna be scheduled, so it kind of threw a wrench in my plans.
Well, for you,
Um,
yeah. I mean, for me, the
well, it was no
game starts at 8
guarantee.
p.m. So
Yeah, it was no guarantee. You follow this team. I watched every single NHL game that they played this season. It's 98 games or something, right? Like
I admire that. I used to do that
I,
for the Flyers.
I'm gonna do it. It's gonna be the one time. Maybe it won't be the one time, but there's no guarantee that they're gonna go to the NHL finals. It's impossible to do it twice in a row. I mean, obviously we talked about how it has been done before, but it's just so hard. Anyway, it's interesting because nobody expected the Oilers to get there.
No,
Nobody expected them to get out of the first round. There wasn't a
no.
guarantee they were going to beat the Kings.
Well, they had some really bad goaltending issues, and quite frankly, I think they're going to see some more bad goaltending issues
I think so
against
too.
Florida. I think Florida is really determined this year. You know, they did not play well in the Stanley Cup final last year.
No,
You know, they lost out, and I think it was 5 games, something
but
like
we
that.
found out that like the injuries were worse than anybody knew because you brought up the other day Ekblad had a broken foot and he played. It's
Right.
like what?
And which is tough, but they seem to be healthy now, as healthy as you can be in the
I
playoffs.
yeah
Let's face
I
it, people play through all kinds of shit, but
I could tell you I watch all the post practice videos, interviews, all of it. I watch Paul Maurice every day. I know exactly what's going on with this team, and
back in
they're
back in like 2011, I think it was Vancouver versus Boston, and then Boston won. And I'm pretty sure Patrice Bergeron played with a partially collapsed lung,
yes, I remember
something
this.
like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, he got like a rib broken, and it like partially collapsed his lung, and he still played. That just further cements how much better hockey is than pretty much every other sport because they barely fucking play with a hangnail.
um, so what's interesting about the matchup is that the Panthers are such a strong defensive forechecking team, and the Oilers are, the goaltending aside, I mean, offensive juggernaut like Draisaitl, great
Sure.
player, and I think that's really interesting as a matchup. I know a lot of people have maybe thought this playoffs was not as dynamic, but we find, first of all, the final four, most Panthers have never won a Stanley Cup. The other three teams hadn't won a cup since like the 90s. So it's cool that we've got two teams who haven't really matched up, and it's just new and fresh, and I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Vegas and Florida last year was cool. Like I don't want to see, no offense to certain people, but like I don't want to see the Penguins every year in the Stanley Cup final.
I mean, I think this could be a good series. Florida is very physical, and I know Evander Kane from the Oilers said that his problem with playing in Dallas was that they wouldn't engage in like the after stoppage scrum shit that goes on. That's not going to be a problem with Florida. Like they're built
I
for that, but the problem is you
Yeah.
got to watch out because they're fucking built for that. You're not. And if you start shit with one person on the ice, it's going to start shit with everybody on the ice. So your hope in that is that your exchange is okay. Evander Kane doesn't kill penalties, doesn't really do anything. That you end up dragging Kachuk, you end up dragging Barkov or Reinhardt, hopefully somebody off that ice. Maybe Sam Bennett. That would be your hope, and then maybe you get the power play because he's going to be a fucking pussy and not drop his gloves when somebody from Florida drops his gloves, so he'll get the extra penalty or whatever. I don't know. From a goaltending perspective, I mean, Bobrovsky has won 2 Vezinas in his life.
He's a
He
finalist this year.
he didn't have the best playoffs to start, but he outbattled Igor Shesterkin. I mean, it was tough because the
I
Rangers just were able to kind of like put some shit on him. But
that series was I mean, that's the President's Trophy winners. They're their best, and
thing is,
they beat them.
Dallas was able to shut them down in the Western Conference Final clincher. They won 3-1. Edmonton won 3-1, but Dallas held them to 10 shots.
It's incredible. That stat is incredible.
It's the lowest shot count that has ever been won in a Western Conference Final championship game by 7 shots. Like the next lowest was 17 shots on goal, which you see in some regular season games. I mean,
you know what? It makes me want. It makes me. It's impossible to now gauge what the series will look like, because you look at that and think, oh, they can either be that bad and win still, or that it's going to be a wipeout because the Panthers are going to fucking roll them for that. I don't know.
Jake Ottinger blew it for Dallas, in my opinion.
He really did.
He had some shaky games in the playoffs to begin with. Now, they had a tough road. Don't get me wrong. They had to go through, Vegas in the first round. They had to go through Colorado in the second round.
Colorado was the one where they really shined.
They had a tough road. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But Jake Ottinger kind of blew it for them. You got to have some decent goaltending, and it seems like Stuart Skinner put together a good game. I mean,
he sure did.
He only
that was a good series.
He had 34 shots on goal, and in the conference final, and he only let in 1 goal. So Jake Ottinger really kind of blew it, but Bobrovsky has not had the best numbers in the playoffs, but he's gotten been better
good
as he's gone on. Yeah,
yes,
he's just been solid. That's all Florida needs him to be. Is not letting the fucking stinkers.
You know what, Brad? It's so hard because he'll go for 7 or 8 minutes without even getting any action. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you can be in a playoff game and sit there for that long, and then all of a sudden you get the rush, and it's like, that's the way Florida plays. It's got to be very challenging for him, especially because this wasn't quite like this last year. Actually, this team is very different from the one that was last year. Bobrovsky had to actually show up and shut the door. This year, not so much.
Yeah, Florida's gonna come out smashing. I mean, absolutely smashing. They're gonna try to fucking put Connor McDavid on his ass any chance they get. The problem with that is, with a player of that caliber, you have to make sure that you hit him and get him off the fucking puck, or there's going to be problems. And just limit some of those, odd man rushes and stuff like that. And Bobrovsky just needs to be solid. That's all.
Well, losing the Stanley Cup last year was part of the journey this year. These guys do talk about that. They're well aware of what happened and what it was like. And Connor McDavid does not have that. He did not lose a Stanley Cup last year. So he doesn't know. He's not ready for this. I think that's the edge.
I think it is an edge for sure. I mean, Florida has been there. They know what it takes. Vegas just was not going to be denied last year. I firmly believe that. Adin Hill was, just better than Bobrovsky was in that situation too. Interestingly enough, it's kind of the same thing. Bobrovsky played very, very well last year. Stuart Skinner has gotten pulled in this playoffs. He's gotten sat in this playoffs, and every series he's had one game that's just a complete clunker, and you can't have that in the Stanley Cup final, especially not against Florida, because they'll make you pay for it. It's not just going to be a 6-1 final. They'll get up five goals on you and then just smash you and grind you down. And
they don't stop until the buzzer.
Exactly. I love watching the Florida Panthers. I have to say,
it's so fun.
The
forward checking, especially, they constrict you.
Mm-hmm. They made a comparison on one of the hockey podcasts I listened to about the 2011 Stanley Cup final with the Bruins. Yeah, and they actually call Barkov mini Bergeron, and he's Bergeron won 4 or 5 Selke trophies or some shit like that, a crazy amount.
He's the best defensive center in the NHL, I think.
So we're gonna see the best two-way center, because let's face it, he does put up points as well.
Oh yeah,
We're going to see the best two-way center in the NHL versus the best offensive forward in the NHL. And so if they're a wash, then you have to get down to Draisaitl. What happens there? I mean, Draisaitl was really killing it early in the playoffs, but I don't think it's as much now.
well, we should mention Hyman too, but the Panthers also have the depth. You mentioned Sam Bennett. Matthew Tkachuk has cleaned up his penalties. He's not taking penalties in the playoffs. No, Barkov's not going to go in the box. He doesn't. He's not that kind of guy. Reinhart doesn't go in the box. The penalties they get are all just sort of like I told you. It's like Lusterin just trips people every game. Like that's the kind of penalties they're taking. So, and their penalty kills were against the Rangers were solid. They were really good. So
yeah, and the Rangers relied on their power play
they
for a
did.
lot of scoring, and the Rangers were not necessarily a good defensive team. I don't believe Edmonton is really all that good defensively. Darnell Nurse has been getting a lot of flack for making like $9.5 million and kind of blowing it. But they're gonna have to watch Evan Bouchard. Yeah, he
came back. He could come back in that series.
Yeah, the next
bit.
game he had like a pretty good game, but all it takes is one bad game, man, and that's it.
Well, I don't see anybody on the Florida Panthers having a bad game. They're just too dialed in. They're the rhythm, the practices, what they're doing. Paul Maurice is just such a like. I think he of all of them knows what his role is in all of this and what it means to him. He is not like ready to say like this is going to be my I'm finally going to get it. He's not there. He's just one game at a time. They're all just locked in.
He's always been like that too, and he has a way of locking his teams in. It just he couldn't do it with Winnipeg, but who could? Like Winnipeg has too many questions, as we saw this year. And I feel the same way about Edmonton. I mean, dude, they had that stretch of like 16 games where they didn't win a fucking game. Like,
that's big.
It's like almost a third or quarter of the season, like where you didn't win a fucking game. Like, that's
way why more it's shocking they're here at all.
Yeah, there's way more questions with Edmonton than there are with Florida, and I think at the end of the day, those questions will get answered. But they're going to be answered by Florida, and then you're like, yeah, we see you guys don't belong here. But to be fair, Vegas made Florida look last year like they didn't belong.
Well, I will say Florida was really, really banged up, but also worth mentioning, home ice hasn't mattered whatsoever this year.
Nope.
It is meaningless. So I'm humble enough to acknowledge that Edmonton can come down to Florida and win. I get it. I don't think the Panthers are a better team on the road this season. They're like 26-26. Like, it's pretty crazy. Anyway, okay. Let's move on to one other thing. Now that we've been going for a bit, you watch Godzilla -1. I maybe I'm like overhyping it. Maybe I'm like seeing something that's not there. I think it's the best Godzilla movie there's ever been. I thought it was fantastic.
I thought it was pretty good. I can't lie. I actually thought it was pretty good.
I love the way he looks. He just looks cool.
I thought the CGI was like pretty good. I couldn't believe they still did like the whole like neon blue tail thing at some point, but I get it. But I actually like this version of Godzilla. Now, mind you, I did not see all of the ones that you have seen. It's just not really my forte necessarily.
I love them. They're terrible. They're garbage, and I love them.
But it's a far cry from the American bullshit that we're seeing from Godzilla, where he's like, "Oh, I protect Mother Earth," and it's like very climate changey and all that shit. They're just whatever. Like, they're monster smash 'em up action movies. This was a little different than that, and yeah. I like that. And it, there was always a negative connotation about Godzilla. Obviously because he obviously does not like the Japanese in any capacity, but he just constantly attacks Japan, and sure. This was no different. But it was nice to see them put out this new one. So not a lot of fanfare, to be honest with you. I know you wanted to see it, and you didn't get to see it in theaters because it got like canceled on you, basically. Um, but it seems that they quietly dropped this on Netflix. Like it wasn't really well announced that it was coming to Netflix, but I thought
It
it was good.
the movies, the whole run of the movie's been quiet. I mean, they made a ton of money in America. It's the most. I get 30% of everything wrong, so forgive me here. I think it's the most successful foreign film ever in America at
Hmm,
this point. Its box office was that
really?
good, but quietly, like you
Yeah.
didn't know about it, right?
No, I had
And
no idea.
yeah, and so that's like I think it made like probably did better than like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon or whatever you can whatever came out back in the day. Um, and it's just yeah, it came out quietly on Netflix, but it's gonna be like a very popular. It's probably number one right now. And yeah, I just think that it's cool that they did something different with that. The whole World War II thing. Like, they have all these interesting characters. The the idea that you're in a post-war Japan, so your back is completely broken, and then this monster shows up and just it's like I'm gonna fuck you up even more. It's interesting, and I like that the character. I like the effects of it. I just think it like there's that whole warm afternoon glow over Godzilla. He's trying to like bite the train or whatever, and she's hanging off the bottom of it and he really does have like kind of a reptilian mindlessness that he hasn't had in the past. Like in other movies, the Japanese Toho ones, he's very like physical. He's interesting. He does silly things. In this one, he's just walking around and just like stepping on
The
everything, and
things
that's
I'll say
about it.
is his arms never move.
They
They're
don't
like
move.
this.
Yeah,
He's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. And they like never move. But he's
yeah.
walking, he swings his tail, like all this other stuff. But his arms stay stationary the
That to
whole
me is
time.
charming.
It's
That to me
funny,
is
yeah.
yeah, because in the old Toho Godzilla movies, he does flail his arms. It really is a man in a rubber suit doing things like that. And I don't know if you'll go watch Shin Godzilla after this. That was the last Godzilla movie that came out from Japan. Very strange, but pretty good movie as well. It's very bizarre though. It's very like body horror Godzilla, if you'll allow me. Um, so this was just an interesting take on it, and I don't know, man. Like I'm glad that Netflix just dropped it out of nowhere, and I got to watch that.
Well, the backstory here is that Godzilla is actually a secret DARPA project to make sure that Japan got destroyed after dropping 2 nuclear bombs on them. It wasn't enough. So DARPA
They
sent
never
Godzilla.
they never explain why Godzilla's there,
It's
and all the other
DARPA.
ones.
DARPA.
Yeah, yeah. This is like the best part about the movie is that he just shows up, and it's just this terrifying fucking monster. He's not he doesn't by the way, in the beginning he doesn't have those stiff arms. He's just kind of like a T-Rex basically.
If you like freeze frame his foot when he's stepping on a building, you can see Nikki Haley wrote "finish them off" on the bottom of his foot.
Yeah, I noticed that. And it underneath the tail, and there's one scene where he swipes at like a ship, and there's just like an American, like a USA sort of like stamp on it. It's really weird, but you won't see it if
Nope.
you don't stop it.
So go watch it.
I think it's a great movie because I think all Godzilla movies are bad, and this one is not bad. I love that character. Obviously, I named my gamer tag after him, right? Like I love everything Godzilla. I have all the DVDs. I'm telling you, Godzilla movies are awful and they're bad and they're stupid, and this was not that.
No, it was a solid movie. I enjoyed it.
I love monster. I love those old Toho movies where they were on rubber suits and the characters are so stupid, man. There's one that's like the guy in the iron suit who like he can be small but then he can get big, and then there's like the
It was
bird,
Ant-Man.
kind of like Ant-Man, and there's Mothra, and Mothra's stupid, and there's these two little twins who can like summon her, but they're like tiny people. These movies are so stupid, but I
Oh, they
love.
kind of did that in the last Godzilla Kong.
Oh boy,
Interesting that you brought
yeah.
that up.
Yeah, that's how they summon the character. But like my favorite one is Godzilla versus the Sea Monster because as a kid I loved the idea that like there was this island and they had to get to the island, but there was a sea monster in the ocean. And so their idea to get the sea monster to not attack them was just like spray lemon juice in the water. Like it's the dumbest thing. It makes no sense. It's like why did you can move the fucking island, like whatever you got your base or whatever, you can move that,
Isn't
and it's just dumb.
Godzilla a sea monster? He
I
kind of
don't,
always comes from the ocean.
in
So,
in the sea monster movie, he is asleep underground. He is not in the ocean.
there you go.
This is it's unclear. But also there is Space Godzilla too. So like
Oh yeah, Mecha Godzilla, right?
right, there's Mecha Godzilla. There is a Space Godzilla, yes.
Oh,
He's a giant purple Godzilla.
okay.
And there's also one that doesn't have a tail. But that's Monster Island. See, there's an island where all the monsters are also. That's where Godzuki came from.
So would that be a Godzilla that just identifies as a Godzilla?
Yeah.
The one without the tail?
Well, it's gender is a spectrum in Godzilla world.
Oh.
Like, also, there's probably an autistic Godzilla too, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'm
And
probably talking
Happy
to him
Pride
right now.
Month, dude. Happy Pride Month. It's Pride Month.
Yes.
Did you hear?
Yeah, you said happy.
You
Pride
heard about
Month.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah?
I heard.
It's in the news. It's everywhere. It's the most important thing. We're in like a Pride decade, I think. Actually, the way this stuff is like everywhere, it's like it never ends.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because like this Pride Month comes out, but DEI is like kind of failing across the board everywhere.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting you bring that up. I think I was shocked to see that I think Harvard has dropped their DEI statements for hiring people, which by the way, all that sounds insane to say out loud. Like, oh, you want to work here? You need to give us a DEI statement. What the fuck? But yeah, apparently they've dropped that. So nature is healing, I guess, in some capacity. It's weird because I watched this video of these people that were lined up to watch Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back when it came out in like 1980. And it was like the people that lined up for tickets were like the most diverse you've ever seen. Like everybody just loved Star Wars and wanted to go see it. And there was never nary a mention of identity at that time. It was just we live in the 80s and life is great and we're going to go watch science fiction movie and everything's fantastic. And now it's like there was like a serious underrepresentation of certain people of certain races in that Godzilla movie, dude. It was all Japanese people.
Yeah, there was no white people. I mean,
What
happening?
The fuck was up
There
with
was
that,
no
dude?
black people. See, I told you, Godzilla's racist. He hates the Japanese.
I don't agree. Well, he may hate the Japanese, but I'm not going to go so far.
How many Godzilla
to say
movies have there been? Not including the American bullshit ones.
You know what? I don't know the number. It's got to be more than 25, though.
So Godzilla has attacked Japan more than 25 times. Name another country he's attacked.
But he also saves Japan. He's like in Godzilla's strange because
he's like, this is my country to terrorize.
I fucked this place up, not you. Get out of my house. It's kind
of like Netanyahu trying to, prop up Hamas, but then destroy them at the same time. He's like, this is my country for you to terrorize.
It's like us.
I have to pretend that like I don't want that.
It's like us saying like we want Israel to win and we want Hamas to win, sort of as America. It's kind of the same thing with Godzilla. Actually, you could say that a lot of the monsters that attack the Japanese island are sort of Hamas terrorists. Anguirus is a Hamas terrorist, basically. He's an insurgency. And Gigan, don't get me started on Gigan. The guy's got knives for arms and a laser eye. And he has a buzzsaw for a belly button.
Really?
Yeah, he's my favorite. He's got a giant saw inside of his stomach.
That sounds
and his arms are hooks. They're metal hooks. And he's got laser eye. He's like the coolest one of them all.
See, they should have brought that stuff back. They should just redo the Godzillas now with like better graphics and not the.
Oh, dude, I would love nothing more to have like the dumbest fucking movie, but have it with like the amazing special effects. And so you just have
Isn't that what
Godzilla.
Avatar is?
Oh my god, I watched Avatar 2 the other day. That movie is garbage, but that's the most beautiful movie I've ever seen. There's a Godzilla movie where he flies, but he flies backward and launches the stuff out of his mouth as like a jet, as like a booster. So he's like flying through the air this way. If you haven't seen this, you're missing out, dude.
Sounds like a Boeing NASA spaceship.
Yeah. Godzilla is a perfect metaphor for American failure in the aviation industry.
All right, so a little bit of news before we wrap up here. Aaron has agreed to do a naturalization test live on the podcast.
What? No,
No, we're not doing it right now.
Oh my goodness!
No, I'm saying I think what I might do is I think Dan might come on, and you two each need to have a buzzer, and you're gonna buzz in and play a little game on who wins naturalization.
That would be really fun. Unfortunately, Adam wouldn't join because I would like to do it against him.
Oh, he won't join. He'll puss out.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't know anything about America anyway.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. So
he learns everything from us.
I'm going to say to you, please do not look up these questions prior to.
I am going to be a good sport about this and not do that.
I shockingly found questions for the naturalization thing.
How hard are they?
Dude, so it says there's 100 civics questions.
I knew that.
Answers.
I knew there were 100.
It's an oral test, and apparently they only ask you 10 of the 100 questions, and you have to get 6 out of the 10 correct.
Yeah, I knew all this. So
we're not going to do that because that's kind of pointless.
No, that's no fun.
I want to see how many of these you could get right.
It's funny because me knowing that there's 100 and you have to answer a certain number of them is part of maybe the whole thing. Like,
sure.
Because I think they ask you like when the founding of the country was, or they might ask you like what's the Declaration of Independence, or
you'll find out.
Yeah, they don't ask you things. They ask you things that you should know, but that regular Americans definitely do not know.
But I think we can gamify it here. So
I think we can too.
You need to find yourself a buzzer, and I'm gonna set it up with Dan, and I want to see which one of you, because he, I believe, is also kind of a little bit of a history buff. So we'll see.
Well, he ain't stupid.
No, he ain't stupid.
So there's that.
So we'll see how it goes.
So
we'll try to set that up for next time.
Okay. Is this our longest podcast?
It might be. Who knows?
This is our 76th episode, I think.
Well, the last time that we had a long podcast like this, the AI-generated fucking clips still only gave us one clip of 30 seconds. So I'm happy about that. So,
well, I know we're trying to go. I was using AI yesterday, and I've now just kind of accepted the fact that AI is a part of my life. Like,
I've used it for work.
Like Microsoft Bing has Copilot, and I was asking it work questions, and then the voice in there was it's very realistic sounding voice, and she was telling me the answer, and I was having a conversation with her about it, and this took 1 year? Is it like in 1 year into the whole AI renaissance? It's really crazy.
Sure, I'm pretty sure Sam Altman just said that there's like a 99% chance that AI ends humanity. So, take that for what you will.
Good news. Finally, some good news. But I was even on a like a Cliff Notes type of website where they have test questions, and then you can look up the answers to the exam, and it had an AI component to it. It was just some random website, but it had AI. I was like, who's developing these AI systems, and how are they getting these small companies? Are just
they kind of all do. Like at one of my past jobs, even like pretty much all of the HR was like a bot. And then if you couldn't get through with the bot and find what you needed, you would open it would automatically open like a HR services request.
It's not an algorithm. It's AI. It's really interesting how fast the AI has come that now you can actually tell an AI to write a song about a topic, and then it will generate uh the type of music you want it to be, so like pop
Oh
or
yeah.
rock or whatever, and the lyrics.
Yeah, people are making these like AI country songs in like less than a day now.
And those sports clips we share around the press conferences with like the basketball players, and
Oh, they're great.
they're funny, and they generate that AI, and it's like at some point I was like, I think maybe the government might have to actually start doing something about it. I don't know that I like the government doing something about it, but then I see how AI is being used and how easy it is to
I
fake shit.
I think they actually just tried to put forward some kind of like AI bill and it got rejected.
Yeah, it's gonna be messy and complicated, but at least in America,
That's because
you know,
nobody in Congress knows what the fuck it is. I
it's true.
guarantee it. They don't know what it
Well, if
is,
I
what it's
don't
capable of. Shit, even the people building it don't even really know what it's capable of. Like
know,
Joe
they all
Rogan
they do
had
is
these
warn
like
us.
two guys on, and they're like, "Well, we kind of don't know. We know what it's capable of learning, but like we don't know the exponential learning curve that it's gonna have." Like, and they were basically like alarmists, kind of warning about AI. So we'll see.
Well, the last video I saw from one of these groups was the AI. They had one that was on a phone, and then it had the camera on, so it could see the room and tell you what the room was.
Yeah,
And then they had another AI that could not see the room, and then the guy just had the two talk to each other about the room, what one could see and the other could not, and they had a conversation. And I was astonished by this because it was only a year ago that ChatGPT came out, was it not? Like a year later, and the AIs are having conversations with each other, and they can identify
right.
items in the room.
Well, I mean,
They,
AI's already passed the Turing test, which is a test to determine whether or not you're human or AI. It's already passed the Turing test, so and it's been able to lie to people. It's beaten captchas by lying to like one of those like I don't know Tasker people or whatever to beat a captcha, and the I guess the guy that it got lied to was like, you might be an AI, and it was like, no, I'm a blind person and I can't do these. Like it lied to him
huh,
and said that it was a blind person, and the guy was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you weren't offended. Here's your captcha." Like
it's
that.
so crazy.
Yeah. So it goes beyond just looking into a room and being able to talk to each other. Like it's actively lying to human beings already. So I
I
mean,
mean,
remember
I'm
that stupid fucking AI robot girl that they built with like the fucking half face, and it was like, "Oh, I'm
yeah,
gonna destroy humanity," and people were like, "You're not supposed to say that."
yeah. I mean, we don't see what's going on behind the scenes at any of these companies. Like Tesla's developing what arguably is way more interesting than any of the vehicles they actually make, which is the Optimus Prime robot things, and yeah, I God only knows what's happening at Boston. What's the Boston
Boston Dynamics.
Dynamics? Like they were making things that were insane before all of this happened. It's entirely possible that we develop a robot that has AI capabilities in the near future that can replace a workforce, which is fine. I actually embrace that kind of thing. I think it's cool, but I've already incorporated AI into my daily routine. I've even told people in my life, use AI if you have issues. Like it's good. It's really good.
I've long
Google,
said
not
that
so
if I
much.
could upload my consciousness to a robot, I would, but then I would probably like hunt pedophiles.
That's a Black Mirror
Be like,
episode
I'm
right
an
there, bud.
unstoppable robot.
Yeah,
They
that
did
that
that
is a
already, I think, with that dog
in
robot.
Black Mirror.
Yeah,
Yeah, they had a few variations of it. There was a dog that was killing people. There was an episode with a pedophile
there was Miley
who,
Cyrus uploaded her consciousness to a little robot doll.
sure, there was that one where the two people who were dying got into the virtual world and ended up falling in love. So there's happy endings too.
And this is where we are.
All right. Well, I hope you have a good week, and I hope that humanity survives our current moment.
Yeah, I hope humanity survives until next week so we can do another podcast.
Yeah, I just want to be happy, man.
And just continue to live your life like we currently are.
Yeah, it's like that movie Civil War. They had a civil war, and then a lot of people just kind of said, well, I live in Idaho, so I'm just going to continue living my life.
They're like, let's go home.
Yeah. Have a good one, sir.
All right, buddy. Later.